In this lesson, I'm going to show you how to use Font Manager. Now, Font Manager lets you view and print out all your future fonts. It also lets you view your uninstalled fonts, no matter where they're located on your system. Now, to bring up Font Manager is easy. You just click on this drop down up here, click on Font Manager here, or alternatively, you can go into text mode, and from the font selector, you can come across here and click on Font Manager. And that brings up Font Manager. We've got our default directory here on the left-hand side, and if we expand this out, we can see the number of fonts in this folder being searched for and shown here. I can select on the fonts here and I can see a preview of the font. I can see where it's located. I can see the font's name, and I can see this nice preview here which I can change. I can click on this. I can type in something like the Quick Brown Fox, for example, as so. Click OK, and you can see I can now see my preview in that text I've typed in, which is a nice way of looking at it. I can go back here and just paste in what I had before, and as you can see I've got this text here, or this preview here. Now, up here in this row of tools I've got Find Font, which launches Font Detective, where I can do a scanned search for a particular font. I can copy this font I've got selected to another folder. I can copy the file itself. I can click on Use Font, which lets me use the font for this particular session. So while VinylMaster is open and I click Use Font here, this font will be available for this particular session. Or I can add the font to the library, which is a more permanent way of actually storing this font, so I can see it from my drop down at all times. Now, to show you how that works exactly, I'll firstly show you these directories here, these default directories, which are important to know about. Here is our VinylMaster Pro fonts. This is if you've got an old version of VinylMaster Pro and you've copied your fonts to your hard drive. You can see them here, and so on and so forth. You can see your installed fonts. These are the fonts you've installed into Windows through Control Panel, as you can see here, so it's handy to be able to see those. These are available from the drop down in VinylMaster. You've got your known fonts. Now, known fonts is a very handy thing to have, because if you go into the program and you drop down the font selector and the font that you used to have there is no longer available, you can come to known fonts to locate it and see where it's actually on your hard drive. So that's an important thing to know about known fonts. It's a great way of finding fonts that are no longer available. And you also have the font library, which I mentioned before. Now, these are the fonts that I want to have available in my font library. So if I just close out of this here, and I come here and I go to my font library, these are my fonts in my font library. So that's a handy thing to be able to have, is your font library there. Okay, so that's how that part of it works. Now I'll come back here and I'll explain how these two buttons work a little bit better. So I'll just bring up some standard fonts here, and I'll scroll down and have a look here and see this font here. So this font ARA is available to be used now, or I can add it to my library. Now I'll just click Use Now here, so you see it's now available. So this font's become available to the system. And while I'm currently have VinylMaster open and I'm using the program, creating documents, etc., with this particular font, that font will remain available in the drop-down list. However, if I close out VinylMaster and then come back to it at a later time, this font will no longer be available, unless I open up a previous document that had this font installed, or I've clicked Use Now and I was using that font. Then it will be available. But if I don't do that, if I just open up VinylMaster with a blank page or a fresh page, this font won't be available. So that's a per session. Use font is like for that particular session. Okay. Add to library, however, that adds the font to my library. So if I come down and select something like this Atwell font, and I click Add to Library, so I've added Atwell to library, as you can see there, and it tells me. I can go now to my font library, and we'll now see this Atwell font's available. So now that's available in my font library. So if I just close out of Font Manager for a moment, and I select this font here, and I come down and I look through my list here, I'll see Atwell is here, as you can see, and that other font that I selected before, ARA, that's available as well. So that's available for this session, but that's available in my font library. And I can see that by clicking here, and I can go here to Font Library, as you can see, and Atwell's available there. So that's how I know I've got Atwell. I've changed the whole thing there, as you can see. So I'll just bring up the Font Manager again. And so that explains to you how that works. So as you can see, Atwell's still in the list here. And it'll also be in my known fonts, because I've now used Atwell, as you can see here, and it's currently available as a known font because I've used it. So that's a handy thing to know, that you can bring up your known fonts or your previously used fonts from that list. Now I can also remove fonts. If I don't want this Bartley font, I can just simply click remove, click yes, that removes it from the list. But you'll notice that if I go to known fonts, Bartley is still available, or still there in my list. So even though I've removed it from the font library, I can still come back and find it later on. It's a very handy thing to have that. Okay, so that's how that works. Now there's something else you need to know about, and that's font families. Now I'll explain to you what a font family is here. If I go back to my font library, if I look at something like this Arrow2 font, you can see I've got it here as Arrow2, but if I go to this version, that's the bold italic version, that's the bold version, and that's the italic version of this particular font. Now I've got 4 copies of it here, but if I close out of it here and I come here and I go to all my fonts here and I scroll down and look for Arrow2, which is here, you'll see there's only 1 copy of it in this list, and there it is there. I'll just make it a bit smaller. Now I can make this bold, as you can see there, or I can turn bold off and I can make it italic, or I can make it bold italic. I've only got 1 copy of it in the drop-down list, as I showed you before. If I go here, there's only 1 copy of it here, Arrow2, in the list, and that's because it has a font family. And the font family tells me that I've got the bold italic, and the italic version, as you can see in the drop-down here. Down the bottom there, you can see normal, bold, italic, and italic down there. So it's important to know that if I want to include or add a font which has bold and italic, etc., I can do that, but what I must do is if I go to say Roman here, and I scroll down and I find a font that has this situation, Campbellton, bold, italic, and italic. So what I'd have to do here is I'd have to add all 4 of these to the font library, as so, which doesn't take very long. And what that means is that all these fonts are now available, or this one font is available in its various families. So if I go to font library here, I go down to Campbellton, you can see it there, the 4 entries of it. And if I close out of Font Manager for a moment and I select that there, and I now go down to all fonts and I scroll down to Campbellton, there it is there. You can see there's only 1 copy of it. There's no other copies of Campbellton. It's just the 1 copy. I click on it there like that, and I've got the bold italic version. I can select over it and I can turn italic off, turn bold off, and turn it back on, etc. And this is how the bold italic version and italic and bold, etc. all work. So as you can see in the font library here, there's Campbellton, only 1 copy of it, but I've got it in by copying all the families across into the font library. And you can see I've done that with other fonts here as well. So that's how you make sure you get all the bold and italic versions into your font library, so that in your drop-down list you can select all of them. Now there's a couple of other things I'll just quickly show you while we're here. I can actually create a PDF font list of all the fonts that I've got in my my preview here. I can also do things as like save the font. I can access use now and add font to library and all that from here, and set my preview text, etc. So there's a few other things I can do there. So that's how Font Manager works. It's just important to remember that whatever you put in your font library, if you want to use the bold and italic versions, you need to do it that way as I've just shown you. You can remove fonts from here, and the other key thing to know is that if you're only going to use a particular font like this, say for a particular one-off thing, just click use font. Don't add it to the library. There's no point. If you just need it as a temporary thing or just for one job, click use font, and when you open up that document later on, that font will still be available and come up in the document, but it won't clutter up your drop-down list here with too many fonts in this list down here. And you can see your font library here, and you can also see the different types of typefaces here using this this tool on the left here. So that's how Font Manager works, and that's the end of this lesson.